Excuse me, may I sit here for a moment?
Of course. Please.
Sometimes a single moment that feels ordinary, on the surface quietly becomes the turning point of an entire lifetime. And if stories filled with kindness, humanity, and deep emotions touch your heart, then like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Kindness, True Stories, where real feelings come alive through words. The cafe was calm and warm on that winter afternoon. The kind of place where people came not just for coffee, but for silence, comfort, and a brief escape from their own pain. And Daniel sat there, holding his cup with one hand while the other rested protectively. Near his daughter, Lily, who was only 7 years old, yet carried a maturity shaped by loss far beyond her age. Daniel was a single father, his wife gone for 2 years now, leaving behind a silence that never truly left their home. And every small routine, like sitting in a cafe, reminded him of how life once looked, and how different it felt now. Lily watched people with innocent curiosity, while Daniel watched life pass by through the glass window, wondering how long it would take before the ache in his chest stopped feeling so heavy. That was when Emma entered the cafe, moving slowly, carefully, balancing her weight with practiced strength, her eyes avoiding mirrors and reflections as if she had learned long ago that people stared without realizing how deeply it hurt. Emma had lost her leg 3 years earlier in an accident that not only took a part of her body, but also stripped away her confidence, her dreams, and the man who once promised to love her forever before walking away when life became inconvenient. She chose a table near the window, but noticed it was already occupied, and summoning courage she rarely felt anymore. She asked if she could share the space, not realizing that this small request would open wounds and heal them at the same time. Daniel saw hesitation in her eyes, the kind he recognized from his own reflection, and without a second thought he welcomed her presence. Because grief teaches people to recognize grief in others even when no words are spoken. Lily noticed Emma immediately, not with judgment but with curiosity and warmth, the kind only children possess before the world teaches them to look away, and that silent acceptance made Emma feel seen as a human being rather than a broken story. As Emma sat down, her movements careful and controlled, Daniel sensed her discomfort and instinctively created space without pity, something Emma was not used to, because most people either stared too long or tried too hard to pretend they saw nothing at all. The three of them sat together, sharing the same table but carrying very different losses, and yet something unspoken connected them in a way none of them expected. Daniel's grief lived in memories of laughter and shared dreams that ended too soon. Emma's grief lived in mirrors and abandoned promises. And Lily's grief lived in quiet nights when she missed her mother's voice. But in that moment, the pain softened just a little. Emma noticed how Daniel listened when Lily spoke, how his tired eyes softened whenever he looked at her. And it reminded her of the life she once hoped to have before everything changed. Daniel noticed Emma's strength hidden beneath her fragile posture, the quiet courage it took to step outside, every day knowing the world could be unkind. And he respected her not out of sympathy but admiration. Lily, sensing emotions she couldn't fully understand, offered her warmth freely, and in doing so unknowingly gave Emma something she had not felt in years, acceptance without conditions. Time passed differently at that table, minutes stretching into something meaningful, as the noise of the cafe faded and the weight of loneliness felt lighter for all three of them. Emma realized she was smiling without forcing herself to, something she hadn't done in a long time. While Daniel realized that for the first time since his wife's death, sitting across from another adult didn't feel like betrayal or guilt, but simply human connection. Lily felt safe and happy, unaware that her kindness was stitching together pieces of two broken adults. When Emma finally prepared to leave, her heart felt heavier and lighter at the same time. Heavier because she didn't want the moment to end, lighter because it reminded her that she was still capable of being part of something gentle and real. Daniel watched her walk away slowly, hoping silently that life would cross their paths again, while Lily held on to the feeling that something special had happened even if she didn't have the words to explain it. None of them knew it yet, but that shared table had planted the seed of change, proving that sometimes healing does not begin with grand gestures or promises, but with a simple act of kindness offered at the right moment. And this was only the beginning of a story that would test their hearts, challenge their fears, and redefine what family truly means. The days after that unexpected meeting passed differently for all three of them, as if something unseen had shifted deep inside their hearts and refused to return to how things were before. And Daniel found himself thinking about Emma more often than he wanted to admit. Not in a romantic way at first, but in a quiet human way that surprised him because he had spent so long convincing himself that his heart was closed forever. Lily asked about the cafe every morning before school, remembering the warmth of that shared moment, and Daniel noticed how her laughter lingered longer now, as if she too had felt the invisible comfort of that meeting. Emma, on the other hand, replayed the scene again and again in her mind. The absence of pity in Daniel's eyes, the pure acceptance in Lily's smile, and the feeling of belonging she had not experienced since the accident changed everything. For years, Emma had avoided places where people gathered, fearing stares, whispers, and the silent judgment that came with them. But now she felt drawn back to that cafe, not because of the coffee or the quiet music, but because, for the first time in a long while, she had felt like more than her loss. When Emma returned a few days later, her heart raced with uncertainty, afraid that the moment had been one-sided, afraid that maybe she had imagined the connection. But as soon as she saw Daniel and Lily sitting at the same table, something inside her relaxed, as if life itself was reassuring her that kindness sometimes does come back. Daniel felt the same unspoken relief when he saw her walk in, and Lily's excitement filled the space before anyone even spoke. And though none of them said it out loud, all three felt that the universe had gently nudged them together again. Over time, their meetings became routine, not planned, but natural, like something that had always been meant to exist. And each visit peeled away another layer of pain they had been carrying for years. Emma slowly shared her story, not in words but through her silences, her expressions, and the way she sometimes paused when the past crept too close. And Daniel understood without needing details, because grief recognizes grief without explanation. Daniel shared pieces of his own journey. The nights he stayed awake after Lily fell asleep, the fear of failing as a single parent, the guilt of feeling lonely while still loving his late wife. And Emma listened without judgment, something he hadn't realized he desperately needed. Lily, in her innocent way, became the bridge between two wounded adults, reminding them through small gestures that life still held joy, curiosity, and unconditional acceptance. Emma began to feel stronger, not physically but emotionally, because being around them made her realize that her worth had never been defined by what she lost, only by what she continued to give. Daniel began to notice that the heaviness in his chest wasn't as constant anymore, that laughter didn't feel like betrayal, and that moving forward didn't mean forgetting the past. Slowly, fear gave way to trust, and trust gave way to hope, something all three had almost stopped believing in. Emma faced moments of doubt, especially when memories of her fiancé resurfaced, the words he said before leaving echoing in her mind. But each time those thoughts threatened to pull her back into darkness. She remembered the warmth of that table, the safety she felt in Lily's presence, and the respect in Daniel's eyes. Daniel faced his own internal battles, wondering if allowing someone new into their lives was fair to Lily or to the memory of his wife, but watching Lily flourish in Emma's presence slowly answered those questions without words. Lily began to talk about Emma at school, proudly describing her as someone special, not focusing on what was missing but on what made her kind and strong. And Daniel realized that children often understand truths that adults complicate with fear. As weeks turned into months, their bond deepened into something that felt less like coincidence and more like fate, built not on perfection but on shared healing and quiet understanding. Emma learned to trust again. Daniel learned to open his heart without guilt. And Lily learned that love can exist in many forms without replacing what was lost. Life still wasn't easy, and pain didn't magically disappear, but it became lighter when carried together. There were moments when Emma struggled with her prosthetic, moments when Daniel felt overwhelmed by responsibility, moments when Lily missed her mother deeply. But now those moments were met with compassion instead of isolation. They became each other's safe place. Proof that broken people can build something beautiful when kindness leads the way. None of them knew where the path would lead, But for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel frightening, it felt possible. And all of it had begun with a simple question asked at the right moment, proving once again that kindness does not just change days, it changes lives. As time moved forward, the quiet bond between Daniel, Emma, and Lily grew into something that felt steady and real, not rushed by emotion but strengthened by shared understanding. And yet life, as it always does, began to test what they were building together. Emma started spending more time with them outside the cafe, joining them on slow walks, school pickups, and simple evenings where silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. But with that closeness came the resurfacing of fears she had tried to bury. The fear of being a burden, the fear of being left again, and the fear that kindness was temporary. Daniel noticed the moments when Emma pulled back emotionally, when her smile faded just slightly, and though he respected her space, he worried that she was fighting battles alone once more. Lily, with her intuitive heart, sensed the shift as well, becoming quieter whenever Emma seemed distant, afraid in her own way that good things could disappear just as suddenly as they appeared. Emma struggled internally with guilt, wondering whether she deserved the warmth she was receiving, questioning whether she was unintentionally stepping into a place that belonged to someone else. And those thoughts often kept her awake at night, replaying memories of her accident and the life she lost. Daniel faced pressure from the outside world too. Subtle comments from relatives who believed it was too soon to let someone new into his life. Concerns masked as care that reopened, old wounds and stirred, doubts he had worked hard to quiet. Though he loved his wife deeply and always would, he was learning that love does not vanish when shared again. Yet explaining that truth to others felt impossible. Lily overheard more than the adults realized, internalizing fragments of conversations and forming her own fears about losing another person she cared about. And sometimes she clung to Emma just a little tighter, as if trying to anchor her in place. The weight of these unspoken worries slowly created distance, not because of lack of care, but because all three were trying to protect each other from pain. And in doing so, they carried their fears alone. Emma considered stepping back entirely, convincing herself that leaving now would hurt less than being abandoned later. And she prepared herself emotionally for that possibility, even as it broke her heart to imagine life without Lily's laughter and Daniel's quiet presence. Daniel sensed the shift and felt a familiar ache, the kind that comes when something meaningful feels fragile, and he realized that avoiding difficult conversations had only allowed fear to grow. The turning point came during an ordinary day that became unforgettable, when Emma experienced a fall that left her shaken and humiliated, not because of the physical pain, but because it reopened the vulnerability she had worked so hard to manage. Lily witnessed the moment and reacted with fear, and Daniel rushed to help without hesitation. But what stayed with Emma afterward was not the fall itself, but the look of concern in their eyes, the genuine worry that reminded her she mattered. In the quiet aftermath, emotions surfaced that could no longer be ignored, and though no dramatic words were spoken, the weight of everything they had been holding back filled the space between them. Emma felt exposed, afraid that this moment would confirm her deepest fear of being seen as fragile or inconvenient. But instead, she felt something else entirely, a sense of being accepted even in her weakest state. Daniel reflected deeply on that moment, realizing that love, in any form, requires courage. Not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it honestly. And he recognized that shielding Lily from pain by avoiding attachment was impossible and unfair. Lily, processing the event in her own way, became more expressive about her emotions, asking questions about loss, change, and whether people always leave. And Daniel understood that protecting his daughter meant teaching her resilience through connection, not isolation. Emma slowly began to open up emotionally, allowing herself to be vulnerable not just physically, but mentally, sharing pieces of her insecurity and the scars left by abandonment. And Daniel listened without trying to fix anything, offering only presence, which proved more powerful than solutions. Through this shared honesty, trust deepened, replacing fear with understanding. And Lily felt the shift as well, regaining her sense of safety as she watched the adults in her life choose openness over silence. The challenges did not disappear, and moments of doubt still surfaced, but now they were faced together rather than alone. Emma learned that staying did not make her weak. Daniel learned that moving forward honored rather than erased his past. And Lily learned that love can stretch to hold new people without losing what came before. Their bond evolved into something unbreakable, not because life became easier, but because they learned how to stand together when it became difficult. By choosing kindness, patience, and honesty, they were no longer just healing, individually, but building something stronger than any of their fears. And though the future remained uncertain, they finally believed that whatever came next, they would not face it alone. The bond they had built through patience, pain, and quiet understanding slowly transformed into something that felt like home, not a perfect or loud happiness, but a steady warmth that remained even on difficult days. And with time, Emma stopped feeling like a visitor in Daniel and Lily's life and began to feel like a presence that belonged there naturally. Daniel noticed how Lily's confidence grew, how her laughter became freer, and how she started believing, again, in the idea that life could bring good things after loss, and that realization filled him with gratitude rather than fear. Emma found herself healing in ways she never thought possible, not because her past disappeared, but because it no longer defined her worth. And each day she learned to look at herself not through the eyes of what she had lost, but through the love she was giving and receiving. There were challenges, moments when the world reminded them that kindness is not always returned, moments when stares returned and judgments resurfaced, moments when grief unexpectedly knocked at their hearts. But now those moments did not break them because they faced them together. Daniel slowly allowed himself to imagine a future that did not erase his past but honored it, realizing that his wife's love had shaped him into the man, capable of offering compassion again, and that loving Emma did not mean loving his wife any less. Emma reached a point where she stopped apologizing for her presence, stopped shrinking herself to make others comfortable, and embraced the strength it took to survive and continue loving despite fear. Lily became the heart that held them together, teaching them through her innocence that love grows when shared and that families are not only formed by blood or tragedy but by choice, care, and kindness. The cafe where they first met remained a special place, not because it was magical, but because it symbolized how one small moment of humanity can ripple into a lifetime of change. And each visit reminded them how far they had come from loneliness to connection. Emma eventually began volunteering to support others facing physical loss, using her story not as a wound but as a bridge. And Daniel supported her every step, proud not just of her strength but of her compassion. Lily watched all of this with bright eyes, learning lessons no book could teach, learning that kindness is powerful, that pain does not mean the end, and that broken things can be rebuilt into something even more meaningful. There were days when grief still whispered reminders of what once was. Days when Emma struggled physically or emotionally. Days when Daniel felt overwhelmed by responsibility. But those days no longer felt unbearable because love had changed their weight. Together they built traditions, quiet routines, and shared memories that slowly filled the empty spaces left by loss, proving that healing does not arrive suddenly but grows, gently when nurtured with patience and care. What began as a simple act of kindness became a life-changing journey, not because life became perfect, but because they learned to choose compassion over fear, presence over avoidance, and love over isolation. Their story became a living example that even in a world filled with pain, kindness still has the power to connect strangers, mend broken hearts, and create families in the most unexpected ways. And if this story touched your heart even a little, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel Kindness True Stories. Support the channel so more stories of humanity and hope can reach those who need them most. Because your support helps keep kindness alive and reminds the world that even the smallest act of compassion can change a life forever.